A young boy was discovered wandering the woods of Aveyron, France, in 1800s. The child was clearly feral, having had no human contact in a long time, and he was dubbed the Wild Boy of Aveyron. He was eventually taken to the Paris Institute for Deaf-Mute Children because he could not speak. Jean-Marc Garpard became interested in the child while he was at the institute and believed he could re-educate him to be a normal boy. He named the child Victor and spent several years working with him to civilize Victor of Aveyron. Victor was considered the perfect experiment on nature versus nurture. Philosophers and scientists were attempting to answer important questions about human development and civilization in the early 1800s in order to comprehend man's place in the world. How much of humanity is natural and how much is learned? Feral children were thought to be an excellent experiment because they were unaffected by human society. Idard's thoughts on the debate were expressed when he outlined his principles for treating Victor. He claimed that man is inferior to many animals in his natural state because a human child cannot develop normally when left alone. He believed that it takes generations of civilization for man to achieve moral superiority. Victor was discovered in the wild at 11 years old. Victor was about 11 years old when he was discovered in the Aveyron forests. His ancestors were unknown. Nobody knew how he ended up in the forest or how long he had been there. Jean-Marc Idard examined Victor in order to learn more about his origins. Victor was most likely abandoned when he was 2 or 3 years old, based on his behavior and the numerous scars on his body. Victor also had a scar on his neck from being cut by a sharp instrument, which could have been the result of his original caretaker's murder attempt. He had probably not had any human contact in nearly a decade. Victor behaved in animalistic ways at first. Victor acted like a wild animal when he was first taken from the forest. Victor howled, crouched, climbed trees, was startled by forest sounds, and mostly ignored other humans. Instead of walking normally, he trotted or galloped. He was never able to walk normally. According to Idard, he had an obstinate habit of smelling anything that was given to him, even things which we consider void of smell. His mastication was equally astonishing, executed as it was solely by the sudden action of his incisors. In certain circumstances, he had devoured small dead animals. At first, Victor only paid attention to the world outside his window. Victor didn't pay much attention to his new surroundings when he was first placed in Idard's care. He was, however, still enthralled by the outside world. Idard noticed, when watched inside his own room, he was seen swaying with a tiresome monotony, turning his eyes constantly towards the window. If at such a time a stormy wind chanced to blow, if the sun behind the clouds showed itself suddenly, there were loud bursts of laughter, an almost convulsive joy, during which all his movements backwards and forwards very much resembled a kind of leap he would like to take toward the garden. Sometimes instead of these joyous movements there was a kind of frantic rage, in which he gnashed his teeth audibly and became dangerous to those who were near him. Once he escaped half-dressed and gained the garden. There, giving vent to his delight by the most piercing cries, he ran, rolled himself in the snow, feasting on it with incredible eagerness. Idard developed a special education plan for Victor. Idard devised an education plan tailored to Victor's specific needs. First, he hoped to entice Victor into social life by making it more enjoyable than the life he had led in the wilderness. Second, he wished to heighten his sensitivity and reaction to his surroundings. Third, he hoped to broaden his range of ideas by providing new needs for Victor and increasing social contact. Fourth, he planned to teach Victor how to speak. Finally, he wished to instruct him on basic mental operations such as spelling words and matching shapes. Idard's methods have since been applied to special education programs, and Maria Montessori has been influenced in developing her own educational methods. Victor never learned to speak. Jean-Marc Idard tried for years to get Victor to speak, but his efforts were ultimately futile. Idard described trying to force Victor to request water verbally at one point. He deprived Victor of water to the point of desperation, but he still couldn't get him to say anything. These studies on feral children eventually led scientists to hypothesize that there is a critical period for language acquisition during childhood. While a child has the innate ability to learn any language, he will never be able to fully acquire language if he is not exposed to any language during his early childhood. This theory proved correct for Victor. Victor was able to understand simple questions and commands, but he died at the age of 40 without ever speaking a full sentence. Victor did learn to write and sign. While Idard was ultimately unable to teach Victor to speak, he did teach him other forms of communication. Idard taught Victor to spell words in metal letters, beginning with words for absolute necessity, and progressing to other words. Victor amassed a sizable vocabulary that he could use to communicate in this manner. He quickly learned to write words from memory. Victor was also taught to communicate using sign language by Edard. Even though Victor was never able to speak, Edard demonstrated that he had some linguistic ability even at a young age. Victor did not respond to heat, cold, or loud noises. Edard discovered that living in the wilderness gave Victor an unusual lack of response to his surroundings. He didn't seem to mind the heat or cold. He showed no reaction to the cold even while naked in freezing weather. He also immersed his hands in boiling water without any apparent pain or scarring. Victor's hearing appeared normal, and he would perk up when he heard a walnut cracking, but he could completely ignore the sound of a pistol firing near his head. He appeared to have developed a form of selective hearing in the wild. Many scholars thought Victor was mentally handicapped. Many of Edard's contemporaries thought his work with Victor was futile because Victor was mentally handicapped and would never be normal. Victor was declared an incurable idiot by a committee of experts led by Edard's own mentor, Philippe Pinel. Edard questioned the diagnosis and used Victor's training to prove it. Although no one will ever know for certain if Victor was influenced by anything other than his feral upbringing, Edard was able to teach Victor valuable skills in a difficult case. Victor's condition was most likely caused solely by his isolation from human contact during several critical developmental years. Victor eventually displayed affection and empathy. When Victor was first placed in Edard's care, he had no experience with social situations. He was apathetic toward other humans, expecting nothing from them and showing no emotion toward them. Within a year, Victor began to accept the social existence he had been thrust into. He was fond of the governess who looked after him and sought her out when she was away. He expressed his appreciation and affection for his caregivers. Victor began to show signs of empathy for others as well. Edard's care has clearly resulted in a change in his social behavior. Victor came to prefer some of his teacher's ways. Victor came to prefer the comfortable life Edard provided for him after less than a year in his care. He preferred to be warm and clean, enjoying Edard's hot baths and massages to increase his ability to react to his surroundings. He quickly refused to eat anything that appeared dirty or had any foreign substance on it. This was a significant departure from his apparent ignorance of filth. While many aspects of Victor's education were challenging for him, it appears that he preferred some of his teacher's methods. Victor became frustrated with his education over time. Victor's education and care were successful in many ways in preparing him for a social European life, but Edard still expected more from him. Victor grew frustrated with his apparent failures during his education as time passed. Edard explained that Victor began to cry and have convulsions as a result of his frustration with his training. His weeping and convulsions appeared late in his training, and Edard thought his reaction was different from his previous rage reactions. Edard used Victor's fear of heights to shock him by dangling him out a 4-story window until the convulsions stopped. Edard abandoned Victor's education after 5 years and never mentioned his case again for the rest of his career. That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching, and please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more interesting informative videos.